Hello everyone, welcome to the last session of our three-part series on exploring DataViews in Operator 10. I'm Shane in technical support and I'll be conducting this webinar today. Allmax Software wants to thank you for your participation and we appreciate everyone that signed up for our DataView webinar series. We have several attendees, so because of this, everyone has been muted. In the event you have any questions, please type them into the chat window. Either myself or another tech will be available during and after the webinar to answer any of your questions. Now keep in mind we are conducting this webinar series online, so if any internet-related delays or interruptions occur, this will not affect the recording. Everyone will be receiving a recording of each session, so don't worry if you get pulled away from your computer or miss anything during a demonstration on a section of the webinar series. Now we will start editing and sending out links to these webinar videos shortly after we complete this last session. I just want to do a brief recap of what we covered in our second session on the DataView webinar series. Last time we looked at setting up column properties inside DataViews, as well as defining our display properties, our display options, our print properties. And we also looked at applying security to your DataViews, both inside Operator 10 and then also applying protection to your DataView from the properties window inside the DataView. In this last webinar series on DataViews, we're going to be looking at applying calculations to a DataView, so how we can apply custom formulas inside a DataView. We will be doing that today. We're also going to be looking at working with electronic DataViews, and I will show you how those work in Operator 10 and how that can be a very powerful and useful tool for some of you. And then we will also be looking at importing and exporting your data inside and outside of the DataView as well in this last series. So I want to go ahead and get started with applying calculations to a DataView. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up one of our DataViews that we've created during this webinar series. So I'm going to launch this from a hotspot on our dashboard, and that's going to open up a specific data view that we've attached to it. This was the data view we were working in last time. We were building headers and we looked at how you could modify the color as well as all the other display properties and options inside the data view. But what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be able to apply a formula to this data view, and at the bottom where we see our summary values, we'll be able to see the calculated value for that formula inside this particular data view. The first thing you have to do when you apply a formula to a data view is you have to write the formula that you want to apply. In this case, I have two influence streams, a domestic and an industrial. What I'd like to do is I'd like to get a calculated total for both daily flow meters for each of those influence streams. So what I want to do is I want to create a simple calculation to give me a summary value for both of these two influence. The first thing I'll need to do that is I'll need to write that formula. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to navigate to the main application ribbon and I'm going to open up our formula screen. And then I'm going to create a new formula inside the data view. So what I want to do is I'll click the plus button here and then it will assign a facility. I need to name my formula. So I'm going to get a monthly summary value for influent, and that won't let me write quite that long, but we'll do a monthly sum for influent 1 and 2. And then I will not be attaching this to an LP since this will actually be being attached to a data view. And here you could put any additional remarks. When you're writing a formula, this can be helpful if later you have to go back and edit your formulas. So what I'm creating is a data view calculation for influence stream 1 and 2. And then for my functions, I'm going to be using a couple functions to perform this. Now you can initially just do a sum function. If you do a sum function, one thing to keep in mind is that it will only give you the summary values for a specific day. So if I were to do a sum function just for a monthly data view, it's only going to display the first day's summary values for both of those influence streams. So initially what I want to do is I want to do a sum function, but inside the sum function I'm going to do a monthly sum function as well. So I get the total monthly values for our two influence streams. So there's also, if we go through our function list, you'll notice that there's a monthly sum function as well. So I'm going to grab that. So now I have my monthly sum function. The only thing I need to do now is I need to attach my location parameter to this first one. So I can navigate from the location parameter button, and since we are just working with our influent location, that narrows it down. And the first thing I'm going to be looking at is my influent flow right here. So I have my influent flow right here. I'm going to go ahead and grab that, and it's going to populate that location parameter for me. And then what I want to do, as you can see, we'll start to get some test values down here, and that gives me my formula result because it's my test value I populated for the first LP. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to add the same function, but I want to add it for the second influence stream as well. So what I can do is I can control, and then I can use a comma to separate those values, and then I can do another monthly sum function here, and then that's going to create my formula for me. So I have that, and then one thing I do want to do, since we are going to be encasing both of these functions, I'll go back here. So I have my monthly sum there, and then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be writing another monthly sum value for here as well. So, and then what I need to do is I need to find my second location parameter. So I'm going to delete this that's in there, and let me make this window a little bigger so I can work with it. And then so I need to find my second location parameter, which is going to be for influent. So we'll go ahead and find that. And this is going to be for our plan influence stream 2, so I can go down here and find my flow value for that as well. So that's going to attach that location parameter. You can see that's been written right there. And then now you'll see that we are getting our formula results right down here. So it's adding our influence stream 1 and our influence stream 2 and giving us our total value there. Once I've created that monthly sum for influent 1 and 2, I can then save it. So I'm going to go ahead and save this formula. And once I've saved that, you'll see it's in my formula list. Now that it's in my formula list, I can then navigate back to my data view. And then inside my data view, we're going to go back in our properties window. And then we're going to go back to our column setup tab. And then from our column setup tab, we're going to highlight the columns where we want to attach this formula to. So in this case, I want to attach it to the summary for the flow values. So I have two flows. I'm going to hold down my control button and select my second flow as well. Both of those are highlighted. Then I have to go over here under summaries, and I have to turn on the custom formula feature. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn that feature on. And once I've turned that custom formula feature on, I then have the option of navigating out to grab my formula. So I can navigate out. It's going to populate a list of formulas for me, and then I'm going to be able to grab that formula that I just wrote. Okay. So I can then click OK. And it's going to attach that formula now to the data view. So once I've done that and I've highlighted the appropriate columns that I'm going to be attaching this to, I've turned on my custom formula, I've navigated out and attached it, I can click OK. And now in the bottom of the data view, you will start to see our summary values start to appear here. So it will give me those summary values down here. Now, one thing to keep in mind, as you navigate forward and those summary values change, in this case, they're populating both down here it will immediately apply that calculation. So you'll see that as we navigate through, that summary value will change as we go through. I think we may have the wrong formula here because it's not giving me the exact calculation I want. Let me go back. Make sure we grab the right one. There we go. So you'll see that now it's adding the monthly summary value for both of my influent flow meters from the summary value there and the summary value there. It's adding those and it's applying those. And since I didn't apply the formula to my second influent location, it's not giving me the correct calculation. So you can go back in if you do make an error like that, and then you can just go back and make sure that you highlight the column that you do want to apply that specific calculation for. There we go. So we're getting both calculations. The nice thing about this, when you add a calculation to the bottom of your data view for summaries, is that when you do navigate to a forwarding month, so since this is a sample database, I have data populated for the entire calendar year, you'll see that it will automatically do the calculation for us. The same as if I navigate back to a previous time period, it will automatically apply that calculation. The nice thing about that is I don't have to run calculations. So if there's a quick value that I want to see in a summary value in a data view and I can write a formula for it, when I do navigate to a different time frame, that will automatically run the calculation and I don't have to go through the process of running calculations. So that's a really nice quick tip on calculating some values. And keep in mind, you can add just about any formula that you can write that will give you a calculated value into your data view. You can add that down here. Of course, it would need to be appropriate to the columns you're attaching it to, depending on what type of formula you're trying to create. Another thing you can do, which is a nice shortcut, is if you go into your formula list and you pull up your formula and you want to grab your formula, you can grab your formula from your formula list, copy that. Then if we go back to our data view, you can go into properties and you can either copy and paste the formula directly in here, or you can, if you're very good with writing formulas on the fly, you can directly write the formula into this custom formula text name. So if you don't want to navigate out and grab a save formula, you can also manually write formulas right into this window right here as well. And when you click OK, it will save those and apply the same formula that we did apply just by navigating out. So that's something that's useful as well, especially if you're handy with writing custom formulas. You can quickly just write a custom formula right into the custom formula text box inside the properties window here. Or if you prefer to navigate out to a saved formula, you can always do that from your formula list. And that's how you would attach a custom formula to a data view. The next thing I want to look at, and I'll go ahead and maximize this, is working with electronic data views inside Operator10, and this also applies for our Synexus users as well. So when you're working with an electronic data view, it's a little different than a regular data view. So one thing to keep in mind is that electronic data views are electronic documents that represent a data view that's been created in Operator10. Users may email the electronic data view, which we abbreviate as an EDV file, and data can be viewed. It can be copied and pasted into another application, or the data can be modified directly inside the electronic data view. The nice thing about that is if you do email an electronic data view to someone and they modify the data inside the electronic data view, the modified data can then be emailed back to the end user, as a modified or a saved EDV with all the saved changes you made to the original document. And it can then be imported directly back into the database inside Operator10. This comes in handy in a lot of different scenarios. One is if you're working at a satellite location that doesn't have access to the Operator10 database and you want to review or modify data for a range of values inside a data view. You could even set up a custom data view just for this purpose. Someone would be able to enter data, and then later when they're back on the network that does have access to the database, they can import all of that data directly back into the database. So that can be very useful, and I'm going to show you how you can do that. The first thing you're going to have to do when you do modify an electronic data view is you're going to have to install the EDV viewer on whatever computer will be reviewing or opening up electronic data views. And the easiest way to do that is to go to your desktop, and from your desktop you will be able to locate the shortcut for your application folder. So if you were able to navigate to your desktop, so in this case we'll go to my desktop and I'll show you that. So we'll minimize that. If we find our application shortcut on the desktop, we can right click on that, and then we can open our file location, so that's going to take you directly to the application directory. And you'll see inside this application directory there is an item called edvviewerinstaller.exe. All you have to do is copy and paste that installer to whatever machine you want to install electronic EDV viewer on. So it essentially works a lot like Adobe. It is a small program that will allow you to view an electronic data view and modify that data, save it, and create a new EDV based on any modified data. So all you have to do is run this installer. It's a short installation, and then that will install it on your machine. Now once you've done that, then you'll be able to go inside, and you can go inside your data view. So we'll go back to our data view, and then from the Tools tab inside the application ribbon, you're going to notice we have some import-export options here. So we're looking at electronic data views. So now we have the ability from this application ribbon to create an electronic data view. One of the nice things is you can set a return email address. So if you are sending out electronic data views from your computer where you have full access to Operator10, and you'd like to set yourself as the return email address, the nice thing about that is the recipient on the end, when they reply back, it will automatically populate that return email address for them. So I have my email address here, Olmec Software, saved. And so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to export this current data view that we have set up in the program as an EDV file. Now one thing to keep in mind is when you do export data view as an electronic document, you want to make sure that you have selected the entire date range for all the data you want to display. So in this case, we navigated backwards. I could go to our current month and just do it for that month, but I want to go ahead and create an electronic data view for an entire year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a 12-month range, and then I'm going to start at the first of the calendar year. So I can open this, and I can navigate to the 1st of January, confirm that, and it's going to create an electronic data view for all my data from January 1st. And in this sample database, make sure we apply 12 months here. In this sample database, it's going to then make sure it's giving me all my data. It's going to create it from January 1st till the end of the year. In the sample database, I do have data for the entire year. Now, when I go to the Tools tab, again, I'm just going to select Export EDV. It's going to pre-populate the dates that I've already selected to display my data. You can modify those dates from here, but do keep in mind, if you do not modify the dates on the actual data view itself, it will not display any data for those dates. It will display the date range, but it won't populate all the data for that date range. You also have the ability to export an EDV as a blank template. So if you set up a data view that's populated by plant users for data entry month to month, you could export it and exclude any values. So that way they would just get basically a blank template that would look like this data view where they could populate values. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and click OK. It's going to ask you to assign a name to the data view. So in this case, we're just going to call it an EDV document. That way we can quickly find it. You can name it whatever you like. Once you do that, it will go ahead and export it. So then I can go ahead and go to my export file here. And you'll see that we have our EDV export that we just did. What I want to do is I want to double click on that, and I will show you what an electronic data view looks like. So when you double click on it, it launches the EDV viewer, which is that separate installer that I highlighted a few moments ago. And inside that EDV viewer, you're now seeing our electronic data view. The nice thing about an electronic data view is it arranges the data very much in a style and format that is similar to your actual data view inside Operator10. Also, you'll notice that we have our data for this entire date range. So as we navigate through, you'll see that we have all the data populated for the date range that we selected, including the summary values for that entire date range at the bottom. So this is a really nice and quick way to email someone an overview of specific location parameters that are set up in a data view. So in this case, we're just looking at the plant influent data, but based on the multitude of data views that you can set up to display in a complement of data, you can then email that, and it's very easy inside an electronic data view to navigate through here and to see the data that's being displayed. Of course, you can do a lot more than just display data. One thing you can do is you can use the application ribbon at the top up here to narrow down your date range. So if I wanted to just look month by month instead of scrolling up and down, I could do that. Also, I have the ability, if I re-enter values or I modify values inside here, I can recalculate my summaries at the bottom. One of the most powerful ways you can use this is to actually modify data and then re-import that back into your database. So I'm going to do that with our BOD5. So right now, I'm going to start putting in some new values for that. So let's go ahead and we'll change that up, and we can modify some of these values here. Oh, here we go. I'm going to do, now keep in mind, if you do have any protected columns like I do for BOD5, it won't let you actually type values for those protected columns, so you don't have to worry about those being changed. But any unprotected columns that you have set up in your data view, you'll be able to modify from the electronic data view. So for our total suspended solids TSS, I can go ahead and change that to a pretty recognizable number so that we'll be able to find it later. And if I had additional dates that didn't have any data, I could also go in and I could populate values for those dates as well, as you can see. And then if I had additional values that were in there and I just wanted to delete a value, I could do that as well. So as you start to modify data inside the electronic data view, you have a couple options when you save it. You can simply save it as the existing document that you were sent, but if you want to retain the original and just create an additional document that has your modified changes, you could put a second document created as a save as, and then you could create that as your modified EDV that you could later email back to an end user of Operator10. Once you've saved those changes, and you'll see now we're inside the modified EDV, you can then go ahead from inside the EDV, and I can click Email EDV, and you'll see that if you have your email set up, it'll automatically populate the return address that we assigned when we exported our electronic data view. And then it'll put in a subject line, and then it attaches the electronic data view that we just modified. And it'll send that off. Now, the next thing to keep in mind is once you've create electronic data views, say that they've been modified, and someone sends you back a modified data view and you'd like to update the values. If you only have a few values like we changed, you could go in and probably manually change those. But what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to actually, if we were to go into an electronic data view and make multitude of changes to data values, we can just import those back into the program. So if we go back to our program, and we go back to our original Operator10 data view, which is right here. So we're back inside Operator10. This is our original data view. You can see that we did modify our TSS values for this date range. So what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and I can, once I receive my electronic data view, I can then open that. So I'm going to go back here to my electronic data view. So once I receive that email with the attached modified ED view, I can launch that from my computer that is open in Operator10 and has access to the database. It's going to launch that EDV, and then once you're logged into a computer that has full access to Operator10, you can then take all of the values from here and you can transfer those values into your database. So we'll go ahead and we'll click that button. It's going to tell you that transferring data will overwrite any existing data in the Operator10 database. So this is something to keep in mind when you do import an electronic data view that's been modified. It is going to repopulate all of the values that are on the electronic data view when you continue with that. Now, another thing that I want you to be very cautious of when importing data from an electronic data view is it's going to ask you if you want to overwrite with blanks. So if you have any empty cells that are inside your electronic data view, it will overwrite the existing Operator10 data with blanks should there be any empty cells in the electronic data view. In most all cases, you're going to want to select no for this. So just in case you have an extra blank cell, you may not want that to necessarily overwrite all the data in your database. Once you do that, you'll see that it will start compiling and retransferring all of this data and writing it directly back into the database. And depending on the time range that you select, it can take a while because not only is it populating the values that we modify, but it's actually repopulating all of the values in the electronic data view, and it's overriding all the existing values that are inside your database. So this is important to understand. So as that transfer process continues, what will happen is all of the data from here will get overwritten inside your data view. Let's see here, I'll go back to our home. And you'll see that I'm going to let it continue writing data to the database. But you'll see that immediately, since we did our data changes for the first of the year, it already applied those. So these were the values that we created inside the electronic data view that we modified, and it's already started to apply those values inside the program itself. So when the electronic data view does import data, it's writing it directly to your database, and it's storing data just like it would as if you wrote it into a cell inside the data view inside Operator10. So that's something to keep in mind with electronic data views, but they can be really powerful tools if used in a large setup with multiple facilities, especially if you need to review and modify any data inside the program. That's one way that you can certainly do it. Now, the last thing we're going to look at today is we're going to look at exporting and importing data inside data views. So if you don't want to use an electronic data view and you want to export data or import data using an Excel style spreadsheet, you also have that ability inside Operator10 with a few limitations, which we'll discuss. But the main thing is to know how you can import and export data. So the first thing we'll do is we'll go back to our Tools ribbon, our Tools tab in the Application ribbon, and you can see just like we set our return email for an EDV and we exported our EDV, we also now have the ability to export other file formats. So we can do an export as a CSV, as an Excel, or as an XML document. And there's some important things to keep in mind when doing that. So with Excel especially, it does write the values that are exported as text, and they must be converted to numerical values for formulas and summaries to work inside the actual Excel spreadsheet. And I can show you how that can easily be modified today. Also, when we're creating CSV exports, be mindful of your digit grouping in a data view. So for comma-separated value spreadsheets, they will take any numerical string that has a comma value in it and separate those values from each other by creating a new column. So it essentially sees that comma as an indicator to create a new column for all the values that come after it. So if you have a summary value or any value that's got a comma in it, it will write that value over into a new column, which creates some spacing issues, which I'm sure some of you have seen before. And then for XML, it's pretty straightforward for XML. It simply exports the data in an XML format that can be applied for XML documents. But we'll go back to our data view and we'll take a look at that, and I'll show you how we can export these. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go to your export section in the application ribbon, and then the first export we'll do is as a CSV file. So I can go ahead and export that. Now when you export as a CSV file, it's going to ask you to select some date ranges as well as some other properties. And I really don't want to do an entire year because that'll be a pretty long spreadsheet. So I'm going to go back to our full month, and I'm going to navigate here to our current month, and then I'll go back to my Tools tab here and then go back to Export. So I want to go ahead and export as a CSV. That's going to give me all my data for the month of June. And then one important thing to keep in mind is if you want to include your summary rows at the bottom in your export, if you have non-data in quotes, so keep in mind if you have alpha code inside an export or inside a data view, you may need to put that in quotation marks for it to export over correctly, and then select non-data in quotes. And then also you can do data in quotes. And then if you have any greater than, less than values that may be populated from lab data or calculations, you would also want to include those. And then once you do that, you can click OK, and it's going to browse out to your desktop, and it's going to ask for where it can write a CSV file. So in this case, we'll just write this as a CSV, and or I'm sorry, this initial one is a CSV file. So we'll go ahead and make sure we're exporting as a CSV. Yes, the other important distinction to remember when you're doing a CSV export is what I mentioned earlier, which is the comma-separated values. So for example, we have 3,196. If I were to just straight export this as a CSV file, it will take this 3 and put it in one column, and then take this 196 and put it into a second. And it'll do the same for all these values here. And what it does is it will stagger out your spreadsheet. There is a way to prevent that from happening. And you need to go back to your Home tab, and what you'll need to do is go back into the Properties window for your data view, and we'll go to our column setup. So this was the same location we were at when we were doing a custom formula. And what I want to do is I want to highlight all of my location parameters inside the data view, and then there's an option under Data Display Format to select No Digit Grouping. And what that will do is, if you're doing a CSV export, is it will prevent it from breaking out those comma-separated numerical strings into separate columns. So I can enable that. And do make sure that if you're going to do no-digit grouping, that you do it for everything, just in case you miss something with a comma delineated value. So we will continue and click OK, and it will apply those changes. So now I can go back to my Tools tab and then do the export of my CSV file, and I will get a successful export as a result of making those changes. So we'll go ahead and click OK. And then again, select a file location and name your file. And then once we do that, we can click Save, and it will start compiling that CSV file for us. We can go back, and you'll see that we have the CSV we just created. And then this is what it will look like. Now you will need to go into your Excel and widen your rows a little bit so that you can get everything to show up as far as your everything being pushed together. And we can simply just go in and change our column widths. And you can see now that you can view the full complement of data that was inside of your data view. You can also, if you'd like, take this and you can wrap your text, and it makes it a little easier to see. But yeah, you can, once you've exported this as a CSV file, you can then go in, make any changes you need to, and then you can go back and you can save this as a regular Excel document. Keep in mind that it does break everything out pretty much like the data view. You will, if you select summary values, have summary values down at the bottom, and it also included our formula value, though it will not attach that calculation. But you can create your own calculations inside Excel if you want to do that. And that's what a CSV file will look like when you export it. So the main thing to keep in mind when exporting the CSV format is that you will have to turn on the no digit grouping in the properties window to prevent those values from being scattered on the spreadsheet. Now the next thing we'll be looking at is just doing an Excel document. So we can do the same thing. We'll just select Export as Excel. You will want to note that your first row does have header data. And then you have your date range. Once you've done that and click OK, it's going to ask for a file location. And we can select one and click Save. And it will export that. And then we can navigate out to our export documents. You will see that now we have our Excel document in there, and I will go ahead and launch that. You'll notice this looks slightly different. Excel does handle the header data a lot better than a CSV file. You'll see things aren't quite jammed together. Everything looks like it's spaced out correctly. But one thing Excel does when you export out of a data view is it creates all of these cells as text, so it doesn't actually write them. If you click the warning, it'll let you know that the number in this cell is formatted as text or preceded by an apostrophe. In this case, it's just all formatted as text. The problem with that is it won't apply any numerical calculations or summaries, and you'll have these little green ticks that will appear in the upper left-hand corner of each cell where you have data. The easiest way to modify that is to click on a cell until that warning icon appears, and then highlight all of your oh, didn't do that. Highlight as all your cells that are being displayed. Once you've done that, you can then click on this icon, and there's a drop down to convert to number. So you can simply highlight everything, click on that box, convert everything to numbers, and now you'll see that it's now recognized all these as numerical values. It's gotten rid of all of our green tick boxes, and it's realigned those into right justification, which is normally how it applies text values inside the spreadsheet. And then once you've done that, you of course can save your changes. And then you've formatted this, and you'll have to be sure to grab any hanging values over here that I missed. But that's a pretty simple process, and then you now have an Excel document of your data view with all your data displayed inside of it. Now the last thing I want to look at is importing data inside Operator 10. So in addition to exporting your data in these various file formats, you can see we've covered that. Well, we'll take a look at XML real quick. I'll go ahead and do an XML export so you can see what that data looks like. There's not really much modification you can do with the XML, but if you have XML applications that can import data, this can be very useful. So we'll go ahead and save that as an XML, and I'll pull that up, and we can then open that up. Now it's going to by default view this in a web browser, but you can open a document based on selected applications if you'd like. But this is what XML data looks like. It takes all the formatting, and you'll see that's in red, and then our data values are all here in black. And it applies those in a very specific XML format. You can modify this data inside the XML, but most of the time if you're doing an XML export, you're just going to be importing this into some sort of XML document. So that's what an XML export looks like. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is we're going to go ahead and take a look at importing some of our data. So you can see that we can go in here and we have the ability to import data. Now one of the best ways to import data inside a data view specifically is to first export it as an Excel document so it formats your data view into an Excel format, and then going back to that original exported document and then modifying data much like we did inside an electronic data view. And you'll see that we can go in and we have values here that I can modify. So if I want to go inside my exported document and start modifying my temperature values or any of the values in the spreadsheet here. Now keep in mind when you do Excel spreadsheets, they will not protect your data like an electronic data view will. So BOD5 is a protected column. It does not protect that, and it will not, when you import it, it will not, if you do make modifications to a protected column, it will not import that back into the program because it is protected. Now you could unprotect that column if you want to do a major import of data and then reprotect it after that. But I'm just making some quick changes so you can see how changes are applied. Now once you do that, of course, you'll have to save this. For CSV format, Excel can be a little picky. It always tries to convert a CSV to a regular Excel document. So be mindful of that when you save any changes. And then once you've done that, you can then exit out of the document that you're working with. And then I'll go ahead and exit out of here as well. And then what I can do is I can go back and I can then select my import, and then it's going to ask me to browse out to find the document that I want to import. I can select that. When I am importing data from a CSV or an Excel file or a text file for that matter, I do need to indicate if there's some formatting. So my first row is a column header, and my first column is a date range. And we also know that since I'm working from an export that I also have selected, it does have summary values. So that way it knows where to correctly populate your data inside the data view. And then you check that, and it will start importing that text data back inside your data view. And then it'll let you know that due to some security restrictions, which is our protected fields here, that it was not able to import all the data from that spreadsheet. But for our unprotected columns, such as temperature, you'll see all of those 20s have now been populated. This can be when you're doing a setup or you're grabbing historical data. This can be a very powerful way to import your data. I'll have clients set up a data view specifically for this purpose, export the data view as an Excel document, then they can copy and paste over their existing data from Excel, or if they have an existing Excel document, if it can be formatted in the same file format as the data view, then that data can be imported back inside the data view. And then, of course, once you import data inside a data view, that data is being written to your database for all of the location parameters that have been set up inside the DataView. So this data has now been permanently written to our database. And again, you'll just want to be mindful of your rows and your column headers here, that you select the right options when you're importing and exporting data inside the DataView. Okay. And that will pretty much conclude our last webinar series here. I do want to let you know that we do have another webinar series coming up next month. This is specifically for our Intero users. It'll be for setting up dashboards inside Intero, and we just have 2 webinars that will go over that process. But in closing, I want to thank everyone for signing up for this webinar series. I hope you got some useful information out of this. Now keep in mind, when we did go over some of the specific details of setting up properties, defining properties, as well as applying calculations and exporting and importing data, all of those steps are being recorded in a video, so you'll be able to go back and replay that video so you're certain that you're able to follow through and do the same thing on your end that I'm doing currently live in our webinar. I'm going to leave this open for a few more minutes if anyone has any questions. But again, Allmax Software thanks you. My name's Shane with Allmax Technical Support here, and I invite you guys to ask questions in your chat window, and then we'll see you in the future with our future webinar series. Thank you.